Hi, I am Anindya and you are watching Checkmate Anindya. I am from West Bengal, India. I am 24 years old. In this channel, I shall share my wins and strategies against the international chess players. I am playing chess in chess.com since June 2025. I am an elite division player. As a beginner, I shall recommend starting playing chess with 30-minute time, where you and your opponent each get 30 minutes to play. That is not a huge time, but that is not a little time either. That's a good practice. Now let's get started with some basic rules in chess. Then I shall share my game. Chess is a game of strategy between two players, one with the white pieces and one with the black. The game is played on a board with 64 squares. The goal of the game is also simple: to capture the enemy king. But to do that, you need an army. So let's meet your pieces. Your army has 6 different types of pieces. We'll start with the most basic one. This is the pawn. You have 8 of them, and they are your front line. Pawns are special. They can only move forward 1 square at a time. But on their very first move of the game, and only then, they have the option to move forward 2 squares. Pawns also capture differently than they move. They capture 1 square diagonally. They cannot capture straight ahead. This is a key rule. There is a special pawn capture called en-passant, which is French for en-passant. It is the only move in chess where a piece captures an opponent's piece without landing on the square it occupied. However, this move is only legal under a very specific set of conditions. The rules for en-passant. This move can only happen when all 3 of the following conditions are met. 1. The capturing pawn's position. Your pawn must be on the 5th rank. 2. The opponent's move. The opponent's pawn must move 2 squares forward on its very first move, landing directly beside your pawn. Example: you have a white pawn on e5. It is your opponent's turn, and they move their pawn from d7 all the way to d5, landing right next to your pawn. 3. The capture is immediate. You must capture en-passant on your very next turn. If you make any other move, you lose the right to perform the en-passant capture. How to perform the move? If all 3 conditions are met, you capture the opponent's pawn as if it had only moved 1 square. Using the example mentioned earlier, you have a white pawn on e5. Your opponent just moved their black pawn from d7 to d5. To capture en-passant, you move your white pawn diagonally from e5 to d6. You then remove your opponent's black pawn from the d5 square. This rule was created to prevent pawns from using their new 2 square advance option, which was added to the game later, to simply run past an opposing pawn
that was already in an advanced, challenging position.
Next, the rook or the castle. The rook loves straight lines. It can move as many empty squares as it wants, forward, backward, left or right, but it cannot jump over other pieces. This is the bishop. It's the rook's diagonal twin. The bishop can move as many empty squares as it wants, only on the diagonals. You get two of them, one that lives on the light squares and one that lives on the dark squares. They never cross paths. Now for the trickiest piece for new players, the knight. The knight moves in an L shape, that is two squares in any direction, up, down, left or right, and then one square perpendicular to it, to the side. The knight's superpower is that it's the only piece on the board that can jump over other pieces of any color. Meet your queen. She is the most powerful piece on the board, and it's not even close. Why? Because she has the power of both the rook and the bishop. She can move as many empty squares as she wants in any straight line. She is your ultimate attacker. And finally, the king. The king is the most important piece, but also one of the weakest. He can only move one square at a time, but in any direction. Your entire game revolves around this piece. You must protect your king at all costs. And you must never move your king onto a square where he can be captured. Castling is a special move in chess that allows you to move two pieces in a single turn, your king and one of your rooks. It is the only time in the game you can move two pieces at once, and it is the only time the king can move more than one square. The primary goals of castling are 1. King safety. It moves your king away from the center of the board to a safer corner, tucked behind a line of pawns. 2. Rook activation. It brings your rook out from the corner and into a more active central file where it can participate in the game. How to castle? There are two types of castling. 1. Kingside castling or short castling. This is the most common type of castling. You move your king two squares toward the kingside rook, the one closer to it. Then the rook hops over the king and lands on the square immediately next to it. Notation: 2. Queenside castling or long castling. This is done on the other side of the board. How to do it? You move your king two squares toward the queenside rook. Then the rook hops over the king and lands on the square immediately next to it. Notation: important note: in both cases, the king always moves two squares. The rook then fills the gap. A common way to remember this is to touch the king first, move it two squares, then move the rook. But there are times when you cannot castle. You can only castle if all of the following conditions are met. If even one is not true, castling is illegal. 1. No previous moves. The king must not have moved at all yet. The rook you are castling with must not have moved at all yet. 2. No pieces in between. All the squares between the king and the rook must be empty. 3. You cannot castle out of check.
If your king is currently being attacked in check, you cannot castle. You must get out of check using a different move. 4. You cannot castle through check. The king cannot pass over any square that is attacked by an opponent's piece. For example, in kingside castling, the king moves from e1 to g1, passing over f1. If an enemy piece is attacking f1, you cannot castle. 5. You cannot castle into check. The king cannot land on a square that is attacked by an opponent's piece. This is true for any legal king move. Now that you have met your army, how do you know which pieces are more valuable? To help us, chess players use a simple point system. This is a guide to help you decide when to trade pieces. It's very straightforward. The pawn is worth 1 point. The knight is worth 3 points. The bishop is also worth 3 points. Knight and bishops are called minor pieces. The rook is worth 5 points. And the queen, your most powerful piece, is worth 9 points. And what about the king? The king is priceless. His value is the entire game. You can never trade him. And if you lose him, you lose. So what does this mean in a real game? It means that trading your bishop, which is worth 3 points, for your opponent's rook, which is worth 5, is a fantastic deal for you. But you would never want to trade your queen just to capture one of their pawns. This point system is your guide to making good decisions and building a winning advantage.
This is game 1.
I generally prefer to start my game with the pawn right in front of the queen because of 2 reasons. 1. I occupy a position in the center of the board, and 2. The queen protects the pawn. Now the opponent does the same thing as well. Now I move the pawn in front of the dark square bishop 1 step up. It protects the pawn in the center and it stops the dark squared black knight from entering my territory. Now the opponent opens up the king's pawn in order to protect the pawn in the center. Now I open up the pawn in front of the light squared knight in order to attack the center and set up a pawn chain. I like to start attacking with pawns from the queen side. Now they attack my pawn. Here I can attack the opponent's pawn as well, but then their rook would have captured my pawn. That could have been a fair trade, but I don't want to lose my pawn right at the beginning of the game. I moved forward, escaped the attack, and continued to attack on them. Now they attack my advancing pawn with their light squared bishop. Now I open up my king's pawn and allowed the light squared bishop to protect my previous advancing pawn. They moved a pawn as well to attack my pawn. Then I moved the rook's pawn 2 steps up to protect that pawn. Now they have started attacking. I immediately counterattacked with my pawn.
Now they bring out their queen to attack my pawn. I sent my knight into the field to counter that. Now they move on to the other side of the game and started attacking me with their light squared knight. I immediately moved the pawn in front of the light squared bishop one way up in order to stop the knight from entering my territory, as I mentioned earlier. Enough waiting. Now they ran out of patience and attacked my knight. I immediately recaptured the bishop with my rook. I could have gone with my bishop as well, but I opted for the rook so that the rook can enter the game more easily. Now they capture my pawn with their bishop. Now, instead of attacking their bishop with my bishop, I moved the rook so that their bishop can no longer change their position, because otherwise their queen would be in danger. Then they attack my rook with their pawn. I immediately captured the bishop with my rook and put their queen into danger. Their queen is now trying to move to a safer square, but I continue attacking their queen. Their queen continues to move away from my threat, but I continue to attack. Now their queen and king both are in danger. They had only one good move and they found it. I saw a free pawn and I captured it. Now their rook cannot attack me because my queen is protecting my bishop, and consequently I move 3 points ahead of the opponent. They castled and are now trying to bring their second rook into the game. I now want to attack the center of the board. They attack me back. I move away from the threat of their rook because I want to free up my queen from any such responsibility of protecting a bishop. Now they are bringing their second rook into the game, and I am bringing my knight into the game. They are now attacking my rook with their pawn. Now I have no choice but to attack. Now their queen is attacking my pawn and then aiming to give me a check. I moved my bishop to protect that vulnerable pawn. Now they are attacking even more. Oh my god, what would I do? Time to eliminate their queen from the game, even though I have to sacrifice my own queen as well. But they have stopped me from doing that. But now I can see a very vulnerable pawn in their lineup. I now prepare my rook for that deadly attack. Now that's a blunder from my opponent. And the game is now in my pocket. Now I give them a check. See, their king cannot capture my queen because my rook is protecting my queen. This is the final nail in the coffin.
You executed a great checkmate attack, capitalizing on your advantage to secure victory.
That's it for today. Thank you for watching. Catch you guys in the next one with Game 2. If you have any comments, suggestions, doubts, please let me know in the comments. or you can email me, which is given in the description.